السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله.
الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا، وأعوذ به من شر نفسي إن النفس لأمارة بالسوء إلا ما رحم ربي، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المطهرين المكرمين. السلام عليك سيدي ومولاي يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك، عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم وهو أحسن القائلين وأصدق الصادقين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن هؤلاء يحبون العاجلة ويذرون وراءهم يوما ثقيلا. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the purification of the souls, the enlightenment of the hearts, for the hastening of the reappearance of the awaited Savior, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, enlighten your souls and the atmosphere with the recitation of salawat upon Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. He was the commander of the army of Yazid ibn Muawiyah on the 10th of Muharram, a wretched individual responsible to execute the commands of his seniors in massacring the family of the Holy Prophet and the companions of the third Holy Imam. A person who is distracted and indeed made to take the option of this world and the love of materialism, which resulted in grave consequences. Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was the individual who was heading the 30,000 army of Yazid ibn Muawiyah on the 10th of Muharram in the plains of Karbala. Throughout centuries, when it came to majalis, when it came to the remembrance of what happened on the 10th of Muharram, whether it's in books, articles, whether it's in the recitations, the name of Umar ibn Sa'ad has become a household name, in that people across the world have recognized who he is and what crimes he perpetrated. In the idea that many are aware that not only was he the commander of the army of what happened on that day against the Holy Imam and his family and his companions, but he was merciless and his heart was devout of any mercy or love, and he perpetrated some heinous crimes against the family of the Holy Prophet and those who were with them. When it comes to the study of Karbala, when we look at what happened before and after, Many of us rightfully discuss glorious individuals who showed us how to lead their lives in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We often talk about, of course, the leader of the University of Karbala, the grandson of the Holy Prophet, Sayyid al-Shuhada, the master of martyrs, the Sayyid of Shababi Ahl al-Jannah, Imam Hussain salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. We talk about the brilliance of his family members. We talk about the excellence of his companions. But at the same time, there is a need for us to understand who his enemies are in order for us to not fall in the same mistakes as his enemies. In that, there is a recognition today that some people would ask the question, why should I know about the life of, for example, Shimr? Why should I, for example, discuss who Khuwalli or Khuwalla is? Why should I know more about Harmala ibn Kahil? Why should you discuss on the member the biography of Umar ibn Sa'ad? It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to do so in the Quran. People ask how? You look at, for example, our arch enemy, who is Shaitan. Allah discusses Shaitan extensively in the Quran. Inna shaytana lakum adu, fattakhidhuhu aduwa. Allah says Shaitan is your enemy. Recognize your enemy. Don't go in the battlefield blind. Go to the battlefield knowing exactly how your enemy works, and you will become successful. The recognition is not only Shaitan mentioned in numerous occasions in the Quran, but also those who followed in the footsteps of Shaitan. Because you see, the story in the Quran that's given is that human beings have a choice. Either they take the party of Allah or they take the party of Shaitan. There are those who took the side of the party of Allah. These are the prophets who are mentioned in the Quran, for example. These are certain righteous individuals who followed in the path of the prophets. But those who took the party of Shaitan and sided with the Shaitan are also extensively discussed in the Holy Book. 72 occasions. In the Quran, the name Fir'aun is referred to. Fir'aun's name is mentioned more than the majority of prophets in the Quran. You may be surprised by this. Prophet Ibrahim is mentioned 69 times, Fir'aun 72. Not that this wretched Fir'aun is better than any of these prophets, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you and I to have an understanding and a constitution of protection against the vices and the ills and the shortcomings and the mistakes and the problems that these individuals have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to hold us accountable on the Day of Judgment. If you knew Fir'aun was arrogant and wretched, why did you display the same characteristics as an individual that I constantly reminded you about in the Quran? That is of great importance. Hence you recognize the Quran mentions other individuals who are wretched and reminds us and pinpoints certain aspects of their lives. For example, you have Qarun. Qarun was relative of Musa. Some say he was his cousin. Qarun recognized the truth, but Qarun was infatuated with the love of this world. And because he had the science of alchemy, he was able to turn metal into gold. He became arrogant, self-centered, his ego ballooned, and he started to say, whatever I have is from me. And he started to demonstrate this wealth towards others and show off. People said to him, Qarun, don't do this. Allah will punish you. Yes? Don't be of the individuals who are transgressors. Qarun did not listen. Allah says, فَخَسَفْنَا بِهِ وَبِدَارِهِ الْأَرْضِ. All his wealth as well as himself and those with him, Allah says, we made the earth swallow them. You have people like, for example, Bal'am ibn Ba'ura. You have people like Barsisa. These two are not mentioned by name, but referred to in the Quran. What is interesting about these, as well as others that I've just referred to, are people who somehow had some inclination or some understanding of the truth, yet despite this, they chose to be on the path of Satan. That these individuals were able to embrace the truth, were able to take the righteous path. For example, Barsisa, this individual, we're told at the time of Bani Israel, 70 years of age, an abid of Allah for many, many years. But what happened when Allah tested him, when that lady was placed for him to look after and she was not well, he committed what? Fornication. Then he killed her, and then he was killed, and he lost this world and akhirah. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala places these examples for us to take heed, because the Quran is not a book of storytelling. The Quran gives us what is known as the philosophy of religion, meaning Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala's stories in the Quran are factual and are practical, in that in the stories there are always many morals for every human being till the end of time. You will not be able to look at a story in the Quran and say, that's very nice, but it doesn't appeal to me at all, or doesn't apply to my life whatsoever. Allah says, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. These stories are the best that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has chosen in the Quran. Therefore, if Allah tells us about wretched individuals, I need to know much more about people like Umar ibn Sa'ad, to make a distinction between haqq and batil, not to fall in the same traps like Umar ibn Sa'ad and others fell. But what is interesting about this individual is that he differs from the other enemies of God who confronted the Imam alayhi salam and the companions. In which way? Umar ibn Sa'ad was hesitant constantly, as we will discuss. He wasn't particularly sure about what to do. He had a lot of doubt. He swayed from one side to another. We don't find this in the other wretched individuals like Shimr, for example, like Harmala and so on. They were bent on destruction, transgression and evil. Umar ibn Sa'ad at the beginning was very much weakened. Yes, he was shaken and he had many options presented to him. How did he take these options? Most of us are aware. But in order for us to take a more comprehensive look, let's examine what areas in his life that he fell, in order for you and I not to repeat the same mistakes. When we look at this individual, we are told that, like many others, we are not able to tell of exact age or the date of his birth. We are not aware when he was born. But his first major appearance in historical works is in the year 17 after Hijrah, when he accompanied his father in Iraq in the conquering of Iraq. Who is his father? His father is whom? Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, in the narration by our brothers the Ahl Sunnah, is considered one of the 10 promised paradise. In this narration, which they believe is authentic, they say there are 10 whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised paradise. This includes the first 4 caliphs, including Amir al-Mu'mineen, as well as Talha and Zubair, which fought Amir al-Mu'mineen and were killed in the battlefield or on the battle of Jamal. And the belief is that they're all grouped together in paradise, even though one stood against each other in this dunya. One of the 10 is Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas. He was there at the time of the Holy Prophet. He fought in Badr, he fought in Hunayn, he fought in Uhud and Khandaq. Sa'ad, his rise to fame was when the second Khalifa Umar al-Khattab sent him towards Iraq in order to what? In order to expand the Muslim state, so to speak. In the battle known as Qadisiyya in the year 17 after Hijrah, he was successful. And when he did so, he went to Kufa, and he himself would erect and build the Qasr al-Amara, the palace that was later taken by the rulers and the governors of the caliphs in Kufa itself. Later, after that, what did Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas do? He went to Iran. And he was also responsible for what? Responsible for forcing people to becoming Muslim. The second Khalifa made him his governor in Kufa, and he remained there until 21 years after Hijrah, where people complained of his corruption, and therefore he was what? He was replaced. One thing about him was that he refused later to give allegiance to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Yet of course, Amir al-Mu'mineen, like Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab and the others who refused to give bay'ah, did not force him to give allegiance, as long as he did not rise and cause and stir fitna or perpetrate violence. What we are told is, despite not giving bay'ah to Amir al-Mu'mineen, at the time of Muawiyah, he refused to mention anything against the commander of the faithful. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas was not necessarily a lover of Amir al-Mu'mineen. But when Muawiyah said to him, مَا لَكَ لَا تَشْتُمَ أَبَا تُرَابٍ, why is it that you are not speaking ill and cursing Abu Turab, in reference to Amir al-Mu'mineen? Sa'ad, the father of Umar ibn Sa'ad, says that he has 3 qualities. I wish that I had one of them. He has 3 amazing things. I wish that I was given at least one of them. What are they? He says the first is on the day of Khaybar, when one companion after other returned unsuccessful. And the Prophet of Islam says, where is Ali? He was told he has an eye illness. He said, bring him to me. And he placed his holy saliva on the eyes of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Then he said, لَأَعْطِيَنَّ الرَّايَةَ غَدًا لِرَجُلٍ يُحِبُّ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَيُحِبُّهُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. I will give the standard, this flag, tomorrow to an individual who loves Allah and His Messenger, and Allah and His Messenger love him. Karrar. Ya Ali. Karrar ghayr farrar. He advances to the battlefield. He never runs away. Do you know why the Prophet said that? Because others ran away. The Prophet of Islam says, Karrar ghayr farrar. Everyone was excited. Who is this particular individual? Of course, it was none other than the commander of the faithful. And Sa'ad said that I wish that day it would have been me. But it was indeed whom? It was Amir al-Mu'mineen. And look at this honorable individual, the commander of the faithful. He dislodged the gates of Khaybar, and afterwards he sat there and he had a piece of bread which was hard. He tried to break it. He used his knees, but it would not break. They said to him, Ali, you dislodged the gates of Khaybar with your hands, but you can't break that bread. He said, I dislodged that gate of Khaybar because it's for Allah. That piece of bread is for myself. And by the way, these fada'il of Amir al-Mu'mineen, people around him and even today have hasad and even evil eye, yes, upon him, yes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَيَحْسُدُونَ, do they come and practice hasad over what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored them? Because I tell you, when we have a narration that says, أَنَا مَدِينَةُ الْعِلْمِ وَعَلِيٌّ بَابُهَا, I am the city of knowledge and Ali is its gate. How can people come and say, Fulan, this person is the window? Have you ever seen anyone enter a house through a window unless they're breaking in? And there are narrations that says X person is the back door. These people. Saqifa. Yes, when you steal, you can enter through the window. No doubt. The idea is what? The idea is that Amir al-Mu'mineen had these features. Sa'd ibn Waqqas says, I want one of them. The second is what? He says, when the Prophet of Islam left towards Tabuk, he left Ali in Medina. And when the Munafiqeen started to speak, he famously said, Ali is to me, anta minni bimanzilati Harun min Musa, illa annahu la nabiyya ba'di. You are to me, O Ali, like what Aaron was to Moses, except that there is no prophet after me. And the third one, he says, is what? He says, when the Prophet went to meet the Christians of Najran, and when Allah revealed the verse, yes, أنفسنا وأنفسكم, after talking about his children and his women, he took with him none other than Ali ibn Abi Talib. The realization is that Sa'ad said, how can I speak ill of an individual who has these fada'il, who has these virtues without a shadow of a doubt? And therefore you recognize that we are told in historical records that Muawiyah, because of this, poisoned him. Poisoned who? Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas. His son Umar ibn Sa'ad, we are told that one of his main prominent appearances after his father was at the time of Hijr ibn Adi, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayh. And what happened to him during the kingdom of Muawiyah? In which way? Muawiyah had a governor in Basra and Kufa known as Ziyad ibn Abi, who is the father of who? Ubaydillah ibn Ziyad, or they so say. Yes. And so what happened was that Hijr ibn Adi was vocal in his support for Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was an individual who would continuously fragrance his presence and that of others by speaking about the excellence of the commander of the faithful and speaking about the oppression of Bani Umayyah. Therefore, Ziyad ibn Abi sends him and 12 others, or 11 others, they were all 12 together, towards Muawiyah in Sham. But he says there are people who have witnessed that these individuals are wretched and they will cause your kingdom to shake and they will weaken the resolve of the people to follow you. One of those who witnessed that Hijr ibn Adi was a rebellious individual causing fitna was Umar ibn Sa'ad. So there were already seeds of discord and nifaq and hypocrisy that began from that particular stage. And when Hijr ibn Adi reached an area outside Damascus, Muawiyah sent him, a letter and said to him, what? He said to him, I want you to denounce Ali ibn Abi Talib. I want you to go against him. Hijr responds, he says, the sword is much better for me than going to Jahannam by speaking ill of Ali. Yes. You want me to go to Jahannam by speaking ill of Amir al-Mu'mineen? Yes. We are told he came, the person who was about to execute him, because Muawiyah said, if they do not denounce Ali, then behead them all. Yes. This man who was about to behead Hijr came to him and said, extend your neck. He said, Wallah, I will never help you to execute me. He said, then let me do it. He said, before you do this, let me pray rak'atayn. So he prayed rak'atayn. Then he said, I want you to execute my son. Because his son was there with them. They said to him, why? He said, because I don't want him to see his father being executed, lest that gives him weakness in the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Yes. Such were these wonderful examples in the path of the commander of the faithful. Allah, we have these narrations about the bravery and about the loyalty of these honorable individuals who today history is indeed proud of them, who recognized whom they are following, who recognized whom they have dedicated their lives towards. The narrations tell us they recognized what happens in Jannah, because there is a very famous narration in Jannah that says what? That says on the day of Qiyamah in paradise, the people of paradise, and may Allah make us all of the people of paradise, will witness that the sun will rise, because in paradise there is no sun. There's no sun, there's no day, there's no night. So they wonder, this immense powerful light that we are just witnessing, it looks like the sun is rising. What is it? They ask the malaika. They say, the malaika respond, this is the nur that emanates and is seen from the mouth of Ali ibn Abi Talib when he smiles. Ali. These individuals recognized whom they are associating with this path towards salvation and success. Hijr ibn Adi was one of the shuhada, yes? But what happened was, this wretched individual, alayhi la'inullah, Umar ibn Sa'ad, comes forward and says what? And witnesses that Abu Abdullah, the grandson of the Holy Prophet, has sent an ambassador towards Kufa. He's present in Kufa, that's where he was living, and he sees Muslim ibn Aqil arrive in Kufa. Immediately he writes a letter to whom? To Yazid. And he says, if you don't want Kufa to be lost, then change the governor. Nu'man ibn Bashir, the governor was weak, yes? His daughter was married to whom? Was married to Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. And he had a soft spot. Therefore, he wasn't necessarily, according to Umar ibn Sa'ad, strong enough. So Yazid, when he received the letter of Umar ibn Sa'ad and others, decided to tell Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad to leave Basra and to come to where? And to come towards Kufa. In the presence, when Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad came to Kufa, he sought Umar ibn Sa'ad to be his advisor. He wanted him to somehow give him support. But there was the first major examination for this individual. In which way? When Ubaidullah heard of the movement of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he wrote a letter to Yazid that this is going to happen. Yazid, before that, had said to Umar ibn Sa'ad in another letter, he said to him, I want you to go and crush a rebellion outside the city of Ray, modern day Tehran, because there was a rebellion there, and then you can become the governor. I give you this Ray. It was a fertile land. It was a land that people sought, especially this individual sought it. I want you to go take these individuals, these soldiers, and free that land from these rebellious individuals. Umar bin Sa'ad began preparing the army. Ubaydullah bin Ziyad came to him and said to him, before you go to Ray, I want you to lead this same army, take it towards Karbala. Confront Hussein ibn Ali. When you finish, you can come back and Ray is yours. The mulk, the kingdom of Ray would belong to you. Yes. You see, Shaitan doesn't begin the wiswas and the whisperings and the temptations by what? By offering the act as it is. It starts small, gradually. Today, we have a problem. That problem is we are stimulated by triggers all around us that push us towards the shaitan. In which way? For example, some people say, I am not an individual who feels in pain or feels bad when I commit a sin. When I, God forbid, transgress against Allah, I don't feel that sense of guilt. Why? What's wrong with me? Why is it that I don't feel bad about it? It's very easy. You know what the Prophet of Islam says? He says, when a believer commits a sin, it's as if a huge rock has landed on their chest. When a disbeliever commits a sin, it's like a fly that sits on their nose and they push it out. There is a problem. That problem is a result of two things. Number one, what today has been called as triggers and stimuli. Let me give you an example. How Shaitan has a plan which is formulated for each and every individual. He knew exactly the weakness of Umar bin Sa'ad, and he knows exactly our own weaknesses. I am watching a movie, for example, which I think to be normal movie, about action movie. There is a scene that I'm not supposed to look at. There is a scene which is haram. What happens is when I look at that and I think, and the shaitan may come to me and say, it's only a few seconds. Yes. If I look at that, already the trigger has been stimulated. Already the thought has been implemented. Next time, when there is another movie which has much more offensive sites Islamically that we are not allowed to look, I have much more of a courage to look at it because I have already submitted to it. It starts very gradually because sometimes people say, do I look at, for example, a haram movie altogether? Yes, without any preludes? No. It grows, it strengthens as time goes on. You see, for example, today YouTube has a lot of benefits, no doubt. We can watch majalis, you can watch, for example, Quran, dua, matam, azadari, nasheed, remembrance of Ahl al-Bayt, has many benefits. But there are these suggestions on the right-hand side. These suggestions on the right-hand side. Don't underestimate how Shaitan has a share in YouTube. These suggestions and others or messages that you get sent are all triggers and stimuli. Don't think that it's a small clip or a short duration. Think about the impact it has on your soul and how your soul is then ready to go to the next level. How your soul is then ready to see more, to listen to more. God forbid there is a music that is haram. Yes, you listen to a little bit. Next day you will listen to more. Next day you will be okay with it. And that is why sometimes we take these sins very, very lightly. Because we have reached a stage in which our souls have been desensitized from sins. In that, we don't feel it anymore. It's like general anesthetic or local anesthetic. Dentists, they apply local anesthetics. We can do whatever they wish on the teeth and you have no idea. There's no pain. Doctors, physicians, they do the same for the body. If it is localized or if it's general, we don't feel the pain of sinning because we have injected ourselves with that anesthesia. That anesthesia is the lack of taqwa and God consciousness when it comes to small acts of disobedience. That small acts are very detrimental. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, don't look at the size of the sin, look at who you're sinning against. The realization therefore is that Umar bin Sa'ad would think with himself, this is an opportunity for me to be a governor. This is an opportunity to have an area in which my father conquered. This is my aspiration in life. It started that way. It didn't start with the idea that go and kill Hussein, go and kill his companions, yes, and we'll reward you. It started with temptation that draws the individual towards that particular heinous act. But Umar bin Sa'ad had a choice, had an option, and he was somehow undecided. He recognized that by standing against Abu Abdullah, by moving this army towards Karbala, he would be committing a major crime. And at that junction, we are told that he was wavering. He went to the people of Kufa. He said to them, what should I do? They said, don't you dare commit this crime. Beware of Allah. You will never see success. People advised him. Yet there was too much love of dunya in his heart. There was too much materialism tendency in his heart. And you know, there is a poem that he recited which highlighted and presented to you and I the story of how sometimes we are in a struggle between the love of Allah and the love of this world. You see, this particular individual, he says this. He says, for Allah ma adri wa inni laha'irun. Wallah, I don't know and I am confused. Ufakkiru fi amri ala khatarayni. I think about my matters and I have two choices. Atruku mulk al-ray wal-ray munyati. Shall I leave the rulership of modern day Tehran, Ray? But it's my desire, it's my wish. أم أرجع مأثوما بقتل حسين. Or I come back with the grave sin of the killing of Hussein. يقولون إن الله خالق جنة. They say Allah has created Jannah. ونار وتعذيب وغل يدين. And there is nar, there is hell, and there is punishment, and there is the chaining of the hands. فَإِن صَدَقُوا فِي مَا يَقُولُونَ فَإِنَّنِي. If they are truthful about what they're saying, أَتُوبُ إِلَى الرَّحْمَنِ مِنْ سَنَتَيْنِ. If they're truthful about this Jannah and Nar, after I commit this, I will seek Tawbah Allah in about 2 years' time. Shaitan has entrapped him. You see, recently, one of the sisters contacted me. She's 16 years of age, yes? Her parents were very concerned. She was wearing a hijab, yes? She came forward. She said, can I please talk to you? I said, yes. She said, I'm thinking to take off the hijab. I said, why? She said, I'm not convinced. I said, I can convince you. She said, I'm not wearing it for Allah. I'm wearing it because of my parents. I said, when you take it off, why do you want to achieve? What do you want to achieve? She said, I promise you, in 2 years' time, I'll wear it back again. I just want to enjoy these 2 years. I said to her, what guarantees you have you'll live for these 2 years? She says, it's okay. If I die, I die. Notice that this idea in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in the Quran? In chapter 76, verse 27. إِنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ يُحِبُّونَ الْعَاجِلَ. There are people who like the short term. وَيَذَرُونَ وَرَاءَهُمْ يَوْمًا ثَقِيلًا. And they forget what comes after it, a heavy day. That is the day of Qiyamah. Allah says there are people who are looking for short fixes. There are people who are looking for short pleasures. There are people who are looking only for their enjoyment today and tomorrow. They don't hold back and think, hold on a minute, what is going to come after tomorrow? What's going to come as far as the day of Qiyamah is concerned? Umar ibn Sa'ad was one of the manifestations of this verse. He wanted his short-term pleasures and he sold his akhirah for his dunya. But the irony is he never got the dunya anyway. He never even had the pleasure of dunya, regardless of what? Getting anything in akhirah. He decides to go and take the army towards Abu Abdullah. Here I would like to pose a question. How do we make sure we don't commit similar acts of sin and transgression like this wretched individual? How do I be a person who, when is given a choice between two things, one that pleases Allah, one that displeases Allah, I choose the right one. And why did he choose the wrong one? You see, ulama of spirituality, and please pay attention to this because this is critical in our understanding and our journey in life. If you wish to know why certain people do certain things and why others stand strong, I call it turning point. We have in our lives, each and every one of us will be given a number of turning points, pivotal points in which we have to make a stance. Let me give you a story to illustrate how this is. We are told at the time of Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum, one of our maraja a few hundred years ago, an individual who was very pious, well known, respected, and he was known to have some communication with the holy 12th Imam, Imam Sahib al-Asr wa zaman, ajjalallahu ta'ala farajah al-sharif. He one day decided to go to the Iraqi city of Hilla, where I am from, yes. And when he went to Hilla, he was received by the masses, by the people, because a marja is coming to their city. But at that time, many of the businessmen, many of the ulama, they were competing so that the marja lives in their house when he is staying in that city. So when he entered that particular city, what happened? He looked around and said, I would like to stay in that person's house. And he pointed to an individual who is neither an alim, neither a tribesman, head of tribe, neither a businessman, just an average individual in the mindset of people. And people were surprised, but no one said anything. He went and sat with this person and lived with him for a number of days. Observing what he did, he noticed that he was an average person. He would pray, he would fast, he would do whatever is necessary. There was nothing extraordinary about him. One day he decided to speak to him. Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum says to that person, can I ask you, have you done anything extraordinary in your life? Something special that you're proud of? This person said, I can't recall anything particular. He says, dig deeper. Maybe there is something. He said, there is one thing. I'm embarrassed to tell you, but because you've asked me and you're a marja, I'll tell you. He said, what is it? He said, Maulana, 10 years ago, I decided to get married. And I went and sought a lady from an honorable family. And they agreed and everything was good, alhamdulillah. We got married. That night of marriage, I discovered that she has had relationships in the past. And she had kept it a secret. I was enraged with anger. I stood up and I said to her, I will go to your family now. I will divulge the secret. And I will tell the community, how dare you deceive me? How dare you keep this high? Because if I knew, I would never have married you. You have wronged me. It's my right, my haqq. You have taken it away from me. He says, I was full of anger. I was walking towards the door. She called me and said, I beg you, don't do this. Maybe my family will get rid of me. Maybe I will never marry in my life. Maybe my reputation will be destroyed in the community. If you don't do this, I will be the best wife that I can ever be for you. And if you forgive me. He says, that was my moment. I decided at that moment, what should I do? I had an option which was legitimate. I can go and tell people I wasn't necessarily doing anything wrong as such that I would say, look, she hid something from me. But I had a better option. He said to him, Maulana Sayyiduna, I never told a single person from that day till today. You're the first person. I decided to keep quiet. I decided to be patient. Sayyid Bahr al-Ulum immediately rose and said, that is why. That is why. He said, what do you mean? He didn't say a word. When he was about to leave the city, people came to him. Ulama, Maulana, we have to ask you this question. Why did you stay in that person's house? Tell us. The Sayyid said, it was not my decision, it was his decision. It was that honorable individual's decision, yes. Imam alayhi salam, the 12th holy Imam, sometimes when we are in a particular position, we are in a pivotal state in our lives where we can make a dramatic decision that shapes the destiny and shapes our journey. It is truly a decider. It's truly a point that each and every one of us will go. Yes? Umar ibn Sa'ad had this. How do we determine this? Because we are told in our soul, Allah has given us two essential powers. One is the fitrah, one is the shahwa. One is the innate nature, one is desire. Yes? What happens is, fitrah is driven towards Allah. Fitrah is a compass that turns towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah created us with the fitrah which is encapsulated with Tawheed, with the oneness of Allah. If we want spirituality, we stick to the fitrah. Yes, we go back to our essence. Shahwa is not all bad. It's there for our physical pleasures. It's there for reproduction. It's there for satisfying of our needs, such as thirst and hunger, yes? But what happens is, when we lose control, shahwa, desire, overpowers fitrah. And that is where we make decisions like Umar bin Sa'd. In our lives, there is always a battle between fitrah and shahwa, between what Allah has created to us and the temptations and the desires. Those who are successful are those that empower the fitrah and make it rule over the shahwa. So, Amir al-Mu'mineen, as the hadith that you all know, when that happens, they become better than the malaika. But when the desire overcomes the fitrah, they become worse than the animals. And you ask me a question, give me an example in the Quran of people who had this choice and they chose the fitrah. They were the Egyptian magicians at the time of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. You see, when they came to Fir'aun, Fir'aun said to them, I will give you anything and everything. Whatever you wish, I will provide you, as long as you defeat Moses. When they came forward and they saw the miracle of Musa was not a stick that was moving due to mercury and the rays of the sun hitting it. It was truly a serpent, a snake that swallowed all their sticks. Immediately, because they were fitrah driven more than shahwa driven, فَسَجَدُوا, they all went down in sajda. قَالُوا آمَنَّا بِرَبِّ مُوسَى وَهَارُونَ. They immediately chose that path because it was not the shahwa now that was driving them, it was their fitrah. Now it was that belief in Allah, because that idea had become clear in their minds. We unfortunately, if we listen to our desires, we unfortunately become slaves of our shahwa. And please understand this point. Sometimes people say, but you know, we as mu'mineen are too harsh, don't do this, don't do that. It's okay from time to time. I'll make a mistake, I'll commit a gunah and astaghfirullah and it'll be okay. When you and I are listening to their evil desires and when we commit that is wrong, even if it's a small quantity, we are giving the green light to our soul, to our animalistic side of our nafs, to ask more and more. And then, God forbid, we become driven by our desire. We have to nip it in the bud. It's like an animal. If we don't domesticate it, if we don't tame it, if we don't control it, it becomes wild. Then we can't control it. Yes. And we are told, Amir al-Mu'mineen wa Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, he says, إِنَّمَا هِيَ نَفْسِي أُرَوِّضُهَا بِالتَّقْوَى. It is my nafs, I exercise it through taqwa. Meaning, just like how somebody wants to make sure that their muscle is utilized, if they're an athlete or a bodybuilder, they go to the gym, they exercise, they stretch the muscles. You and I must stretch the muscles of our soul by taqwa and by being driven through the fitrah. We have to go through it that way. There is no other option, yes? The realization today is what? Is that Allah says there are those who take their shahwa as their ilah. أَفَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. The Quran says in chapter 45, verse 23, there are those who consider their desires as their Lord. And we see them around us, no doubt. Wherever there is enjoyment, I want to have it. And you know, I've seen people sometimes say, or they stick things in their cars. Not much here in the United States, in UK they do, right? It's a sticker on their cars. It says, you only live once, enjoy it. You seen those? Why? Because they say, it's okay. And then they have these bucket lists, 30 things I have to do before I die. Yes. Because it's all driven about enjoyment and fun. There is nothing in Islam against fun per se, provided it doesn't drive you towards becoming the party of shaitan. And that unfortunately happens. And one of the examples of this is this wretched individual, yes, who today millions of people throughout history have sent their la'na upon him, yes, because of that one decision that he made. Imagine that he had that choice And then he, what? Later saw another man who had a choice. Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. Hurr had the same choice, had the same opportunity. And when Hurr was walking back and forth, Umar ibn Sa'ad said to him, are you hesitant? What's wrong with you? Hurr said, إني أخير نفسي بين الجنة والنار. I am making a decision between Jannah and Jahannam. You have lost in your decision, O Umar, but I will make the right decision. I will never choose anything above Abu Abdullah. And he rides his horse and goes towards Hussein ibn Ali. Yes. Umar ibn Sa'ad decides. He takes an army of 4,000 and he reaches Karbala either on the 3rd or the 4th of the month of Muharram, 61 after Hijrah. When he reaches there, what does he do? He is still not sure, about hoping that he doesn't have to commit the crimes. Because today, I have seen when undertaking research about the life of this person, there are even scholars today and in the past who praise him. They say he was like a pigeon in the mosque. He would come to the mosque, he would pray, he would remember Allah, he would read the Quran. Some scholars today from other schools consider him a thiqa. They narrate his hadith. Yes, they consider that he's trustworthy because so-called he used to perform the salah. And you know why that is? One brother in Hajj asked me a few weeks ago when he saw what was happening, when he saw Jannatul Baqi, he asked me why are they not seeing the truth? I said to them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He tells us that He places the light in the hearts of individuals that gives them the ability to decipher between haqq and batil. That light is the Quran and the Ahl al-Bayt. When you don't have those two, it becomes blurred. You will not be able to see what is true and what is false. You start to somehow imagine this man, yes, he committed crimes, yes, but he's still a good person. You started to say, I remember when this wretched dictator of Iraq, Saddam, was hanged, I myself received emails from friends from other schools who said, don't say anything bad about him. Because when the rope was on his neck, he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. He has killed millions. He's committed crimes, chemical weapons. But just because he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, brother, he's a Muslim, it's okay. Can you see how weak and how shallow some people can become? The realization is that what? When he reached Karbala on the 7th of the month of Muharram, he received a letter from Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad that said, cut the water supply from the caravan from the side of Hussein. And he sent Amr ibn al-Hajjaj with a number of soldiers, and they would cut the water supply from this particular group of holy individuals. But you see, despite his actions, the spirit of the Ahl al-Bayt was a spirit of love and spirit of compassion, and that which gives people opportunities. Abu Abdullah al-Hussein did not give up on Umar ibn Sa'ad. He himself would call and say, where is Umar ibn Sa'ad? I want to speak to him. Today in Karbala, there is a place where they say, and it's still preserved, where Imam alayhi salam met this individual. And Imam spoke to him. He said to him, Ya ibn Sa'ad, atuqatiluni? Oh, the son of Sa'ad, are you going to kill me? Ama tattaqillah alladhi ilayhi ma'aduk? Aren't you not afraid of Allah that you're going to return to? That is where you are going to go. فَأَنَا ابْنُ مَنْ قَدْ عَلِمْتُ. Do you not know who I am the son of? Do you not know who I am? أَلَا تَكُونُ مَعِي وَتَدَعْ هَؤُلَاء. Don't you want to be with me and leave these people? فَإِنَّهُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. I guarantee you, by doing this, you're going to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes in our lives, we give up on people. We see individuals who, God forbid, are into drugs, are into illicit relationships. They don't come to mosque. They don't, for example, engage. And we say there is no hope in them. Forget it, I'm not talking to them. Or within the family members, people often ask ulama, shall I dissociate my relationship with people who have committed certain acts and certain sins? There is always a chance. Ask Allah for the hidayah of these people. Sometimes we need to give them the hujjah on the day of Qiyamah. If I do not do what I can in this world, they will say to Allah, my family member, my friend never came and advised me. Abu Abdullah on the plains of Karbala, knowing exactly who Umar ibn Sa'ad is, tries to dissuade him, tries to appeal to his conscience, speaks to his heart, yes? And he did so for the others as well. Through a number of sermons, Umar ibn Sa'ad responds to the Imam. He says to him, but I have a problem. He said, what is it? He said, my property, my houses. Imam said, I will give you better. He says, my wealth. He said, I will give you gardens in Medina. Come with me, and there are gardens and farms in Medina I will give you. That man says, I'm afraid my family will be killed by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. One excuse after the other. Imam alayhi salam tried and tried and tried. But this man had reached a point. Quran tells us, فَلَمَّا زَاغُوا أَزَاغَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُمْ. Allah says, when you commit certain crimes, when you make certain decisions, when you perpetrate sin after sin, Allah seals your heart. When Allah seals your heart, there is no going back. There is no return. When the heart becomes darkened, when the heart is sealed, that's the end for the human being. And do you know how the heart is sealed? It's not that God, the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala, is unjust. No, it's through the actions of the human beings. The sixth holy Imam says, your heart is like a white piece of cloth. You put a dot in it. If you don't clean it, what happens? It becomes embedded in the fabric. Then other dot, until the heart becomes so darkened, full of blackness, and it's too late. Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam recognized that this individual, it was too late, but he still wanted to give him a chance. He still wanted, and Allah says to Musa alayhi salam, اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Speak to him softly. This Fir'aun says, أنا ربكم الأعلى, I am your supreme Lord. Doesn't Allah know that this Fir'aun is too late for him? But it's to say to us, don't give up on human beings. Look at every individual as an opportunity, as a person who can come back to the path. And that's why you find that Umar ibn Sa'ad would reject the Imam. And the Imam alayhi salam would then make a dua. He would supplicate and he say, مَا لَكَ ذَبَحَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَى فِرَاشِكَ. He says, I ask Allah that you are slaughtered whilst you are in your bed. وَلَا غَفَرَ لَكَ يَوْمَ حَشْرِكَ. And I ask Allah not to forgive your sins on the day of judgment. فَوَاللَّهِ إِنِّي لَأَرْجُو أَن تَأْكُلَ مِن بِرِّ الْعِرَاقِ إِلَّا يَسِيرًا. By Allah, I have asked Allah that you do not have any rizq or sustenance from Iraq except a little bit. Umar ibn Sa'ad then laughs at Imam and says, it's okay, I'll have malt, sha'ir, that will be enough for me. And he walks away. Yes. When it came to the eve of Ashura, Umar ibn Sa'ad said what? He said, we would like to attack them. We would like to fight them. Before that, he sent a letter to Yazid. He said to Yazid, there is now hope. The fire has been extinguished. There is unity. Hussein is willing to give bay'ah to Yazid. His letter was to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad rather. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, whilst receiving the letter, he got another letter from Shimr. Shimr said, don't listen to Umar ibn Sa'ad. He's weak. If you let Hussein go, forget about your rule and the rule of Yazid. Ubaydullah writes a letter to Umar ibn Sa'ad. He says, I did not send you to make peace with Hussein. I sent you to take a forceful bay'ah from him. He doesn't give you a bay'ah there and then. Behead him and mutilate their bodies and take their families as captives. If you don't do so, I will make Shimr the head of the army. When Shimr showed this letter, or when Umar ibn Sa'ad read this letter, this increased the jealousy in him. Yes, this increased the willingness to fight Imam alayhi salam and to what? And to reject any possibility of leaving the Ahl al-Bayt, leaving the Imam and his family. And that's why he wanted to commence the battle on the 9th. But Imam alayhi salam sent him a message that allow us this night, because we would like to spend it in ibadah, in the remembrance of Allah and the recitation of Quran. No doubt, the campsite of Umar ibn Sa'ad spent that night, the eve of Ashura, whilst in the state of intoxication, as well as listening to all kinds of different music. Whereas the side of Hussein ibn Ali, peace be upon him, were up and down in remembrance of Allah like the humming of the bees. And so on the 10th morning, Umar ibn Sa'ad listens to the sermon of the Imams. And at the same time does what? At the same time picks up an arrow and shoots it towards the side of the Imam and says, Ishhadu li 'inda al-Amir. Be witness with the Amir, with the governor. I was the one who commenced the battle, and I was the first one to shoot an arrow towards the side of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And therefore the battle commenced. During the battle, this individual, this wretched man, would constantly say to his army, don't go and fight these people one by one. Go and fight them 4 against 1, 10 against 1, because they will defeat you. He recognized who Ashab and the Ansar of Hussein are. He constantly pushed his companions and his army towards this particular strategy. And he was malicious and evil in many actions. One of them is he came to a man by the name of Tariq ibn Kathir. He said to him, Tariq, do you know that man who's fighting? He said, yes. Do you know who that man is? He said, who is it? He said, that man is Ali al-Akbar. I want you to go and kill him. Tariq said, you have the kingdom of Ray and you want me to go and kill him? What are you going to give me? Give me something. Umar ibn Sa'ad said, I'll give you Mosul. You can have Mosul. He said, how am I guaranteed that I'll get Mosul if I kill Ali al-Akbar? He said, I'll give you my ring. So he gave him what? His ring. And this Tariq went, and Ali al-Akbar, the lion of Allah on the battlefield, finished him. But this was the characteristics of this wretched individual who went so into the whisperings and the temptations of shaitan that his heart filled with venom, his heart filled with hatred towards the holy Ahl al-Bayt, towards Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And that's why we are told that amongst a number of his crimes were what? A number of his crimes was that he was the one who told Harmala slaughter the 6-month-old. He said, اقطع نزاع القوم. Yes. He was the one whom Sayyidah, when she stood on the hill, addressed and said, Oh Umar ibn Sa'ad, are you going to let Hussein die? Umar ibn Sa'ad was the man who said to the army of his, don't give water to Hussein. When he was in his last moments, he was asking for water. He said, don't feed him any water. He was the one that said, surround him. Yes. And he was the one who cried out, who is going to finish his life? That's Umar ibn Sa'ad. Yes. He was the one who stole the shield of Abu Abdullah after he was martyred. He was the one who cried out, who is going to burn the tents of the munafiqeen? احرقوا خيوم الظالمين, he said. Yes. He was the one who said, where are the 10 horsemen who will dig their heels onto the chest of Hussein? He was the one that paraded the family members of the Ahl al-Bayt from one city to another, humiliating them, torturing them, tormenting them, amongst a list of his atrocities and his crimes. But you know exactly as Abu Abdullah al-Hussein said, materialized as far as this man is concerned. Because he never attained the kingdom of Ray. He was disgraced when he returned back to Kufa. He was the subject of mockery of children, and people laughed at him. Yes. And eventually, in the year 66 after Hijrah, when Mukhtar al-Thaqafi became the governor of Kufa, he sought Umar ibn Sa'ad. Narrations tell us Umar ibn Sa'ad's sister was also the wife of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. But Mukhtar did not spare the life of this individual. Yes. He said, I will avenge the blood of Karbala. And that's why we are told what? We are told that he sent his trusted commander, Mukhtar's trusted commander, Kiyan, towards the house of Umar ibn Sa'ad. He went inside the house looking for him. He was on his bed. When he came to his bed, he would refuse to come because Mukhtar wanted to arrest him, to make him go through trial. But Umar ibn Sa'ad, who by that time he was disgraced, would fight whilst he is sitting on his bed, and Kiyan finished him and brought his head towards Mukhtar. Mukhtar sent the head towards the 4th Imam, Zayn al-Abidin, and we are told the head reached the Imam on the 9th of Rabi' al-Awwal. One of the reasons Why? The Ahl al-Bayt celebrated at that time because they saw the head of Umar ibn Sa'ad. But with the head of Umar ibn Sa'ad was his son Hafs, who was there in Karbala. And when Imam alayhi salam said to Umar ibn Sa'ad, allow us to pray, he was hesitant. His son Hafs said, don't let Hussein pray. Keep fighting him. Hafs was arrested by Mukhtar. He was bought. Mukhtar said to him, what do you think I should do with you? Hafs said, there is no point of living. He said, your father killed Hussein and killed Ali al-Akbar. But wallah, if I kill you and have killed your father, you are not worth, and it is not avenging the pure blood of these holy individuals. It's not the same. These holy individuals cannot be ever compensated. So therefore he killed whom? This particular son of Umar ibn Sa'ad, and this man remained the subject of condemnation and the withdrawal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy for centuries as a disgraced person who stood against the Ahl al-Bayt. And no doubt this is the result of every individual who challenges the Ahl al-Bayt, who when they're presented with a chance to join the Ahl al-Bayt, the path of salvation, the ship of success and Jannah, and refuses to do so, such is their fate. Such will be how they will encounter, no doubt, yes. And today we find, what do we find? We find examples of individuals who stand against the Ahl al-Bayt in many different ways, including those who commit crimes against the Shia of the Ahl al-Bayt in different parts of the world, those who blow themselves inside the majalis, inside the processions, kill the innocent civilians. When it comes to the commemoration and the honoring of the masa'ib of the Ahl al-Bayt. And those who stand the Ahl al-Bayt against the Ahl al-Bayt are those who destroy the shrines of Ahl al-Bayt. You see now in Muharram, in Mashhad, in Karbala, in Samarra, in Sayyid Zainab in Sham, in Najaf, in Kadhimiyya, in many places around the world, there are majalis, there are people crying, there are people doing matam, but there is no one crying in Jannatul Baqi. The Imams are alone in Jannatul Baqi'. No one is able to do a majlis in next to the Imams. You know, the poem says, Jannatul Baqi' speaks to Karbala. It says, oh Karbala, you have shrines, you have millions of visitors. Where are my shrines? Where are my visitors? The darkness of the night is all that I see. I do not hear the musibah of Hussein. When will I hear the musibah of Abbas and Ali al-Akbar? No doubt, yes. But I ask you, who is buried in Jannatul Baqi'? You have Baneen. What should we say about Baneen? All her life was for Ahl al-Bayt. When Bishr came and said, who is this lady? She looked at him and said, tell me about Hussein. Inform me about Hussein. He says, may Allah give you patience over the loss of your son Abdullah. She says, tell me Hussein. He says, may Allah give you patience over the loss of your son Uthman, Ja'far. She says, Hussein. He says, Abbas is gone. She drops the son of Abbas she was carrying, but she said, Hussein. Tell me of Aba Abdullah. She would sit in Jannatul Baqi' and she would have graves for her 4 sons who were fallen on the plains of Karbala. Those 4 Imams who are buried in Jannatul Baqi'. You know, these 4 Imams, all our Imams had a relationship with the Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. But these 4 Imams in particular, Imam Al-Hasan Al-Mujtaba sits next to his brother and cries when he's about to leave this world. Imam Al-Hussein says to him, brother, why is it that you crying? Because of the impact of the poison. He says, La yawmka yawmuka ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like yours, O Hussein. We have Imam Zain al-Abidin. Imam Zain al-Abidin in Medina, he walks, he sees the butcher slaughtering the animals. He says to him, I beg you, have you fed this animal water? He says, of course, we feed all the animals water. He says, my father Hussein was slaughtered thirsty. عطشانا بأرض كربلاء. Then he sees someone being buried. He said to them, when did this man pass away? They say, only a few hours ago. He says, my father remained on the plains of Karbala for 3 days without burial. You have Imam Sadiq, whose house was burning one day because of the actions of the enemies. He saw his family running from one place to another. He cried. They said to him, oh Imam, why is it that you cry? Is it because your house is burning? He says, no Allah, but when I saw my family running from one place to another, I remembered Sham Ghariba and the daughters of Ali and Fatima and the daughters of Hussein, their clothes catching fire, running from one place to another. And Imam Al-Baqir, who was on their day of Ashura, 3 years of age, who saw the massacre of Karbala. Imam al-Baqir says, when I saw my father breathing his last, I sat next to him. I provided him with water. I hugged him. But when I hugged him, my father began to cry. He said to me, son Muhammad, now before I die, you're next to me. My father Hussein was alone on the plains of Karbala. There is no one next to him on the plains of Karbala. Then I felt this sorrow in my heart, Imam al-Baqir says. I decided to hug the chest of my father, Zayn al-Abidin. I kissed his chest and I hugged it. But my father cried more and more. I said to him, Father, what happened? He said, you have kissed and hugged my chest, but who came on the chest of my father Hussein?